Hey there, my friend. Welcome back to my channel, where we turn the noise of the world down low, and let the calm in. Tonight, we're diving into a story that's like a warm cup of tea for the soul, slow, gentle, a little bittersweet, but always soothing. It's called The Sunglasses That Hid Her Tears, and it's about love, time, and those quiet moments that stay with us long after the world has moved on. So get comfortable, let your shoulders relax, and let us drift into a story that might just carry you off to sleep. Part 1. Late summer evening on a Manhattan corner, 1985. It was a sticky August night in Manhattan, the air thick with taxi fumes and the faint smell of rain. I'd been at the office since dawn, numbing myself with numbers for a merger that felt more like a game. By 10, my tie hung loose, my feet ached, and I craved the burnt coffee from the 24-hour diner on the corner. That's where I saw her. She wiped the counter with a tired rag, her hair in a ponytail fighting humidity. Oversized tortoise-shell sunglasses hid her eyes, but her smile, warm, secretive, drew me in. "Late night?" she asked, voice rough from talking. Ink stained her fingers, blue and green, like she'd been painting. We talked. Her name was Lynn. She worked nights to fund her dream of designing clothes, sketching on napkins when the diner was slow. The sunglasses, a thrift store find, made her feel like a movie star in her own story. "In my movie," she said, tapping the frames, "I wear a navy silk dress with shoulder pleats like wings." People stop and stare. I told her I was Jack, new to Wall Street, already weary of suits and spreadsheets. "We're wearing the wrong costumes," she laughed, sliding the sunglasses down her nose to reveal hazel eyes flecked with gold. She made a deal, return tomorrow, and she de-sketched the dress. I agreed, surprised by the flutter in my chest. Night after night, we talked. She showed me sketches, dresses, coats, a world beyond the diner. The sunglasses became a joke, slipping when she laughed, hiding her eyes when she grew quiet. By September, the air cooled, and she brought her sketchbook, letting me flip through pages of precision and passion. "Soon," she'd say, "these will be real." One night, she led me to a dark storefront. "That mannequin," she said, "will wear my design. People will ask who made it." Her voice was soft, determined. I took the sunglasses from her face, set them on her head. Her eyes met mine, vulnerable, fiery. "You don't need these," I said. "In my version, they see you." The kiss was gentle, tentative, like we feared breaking the spell. Her hand on my cheek, ink sticky, the city fading until only we existed. We walked back hand in hand, her sunglasses atop her head, the diner's light welcoming us home. I didn't know then how those sunglasses would come to hide more than smiles, dreams, fears, tears. But in that moment, they were a bridge, a promise of something real. As I watched her hum Joni Mitchell, wiping counters, I felt peace. This was the climb worth making, with her beside me. Part 2. Park Avenue apartment lights. 3 years later, the diner nights felt like a distant movie, warm, grainy, playing in the back of my mind as I unlocked the door to our Park Avenue apartment. Lynn had traded her diner apron for a studio in Brooklyn, and I'd traded my tired suits for tailored ones that fit just right. We had a routine. I'd bring home takeout from her favorite Thai place, she'd show me sketches for the day, and we'd talk about someday a loft in Soho, someday kids, someday a summer house in the Hamptons. The apartment was all sharp edges and clean lines, just like my office except for Lynn's corner. Her sewing machine hummed by the window, fabric swatches pinned to the wall like a patchwork of dreams, silk the color of storm clouds, linen that looked like sunlight filtered through leaves, a velvet scrap she'd stolen from a Broadway costume shop. This, she'd say, holding up a half-sewn blouse, is for a woman who means business but doesn't want to look like she's borrowed her husband's suit. I'd nod, not really understanding, but loving the way her hands moved as she talked, as if she were stitching the world into something better. Most mornings, I'd wake up to an empty bed. She'd already be in Brooklyn, sketching while the coffee brewed. Most nights, I'd come home to her asleep on the couch, a sketchbook splayed across her chest, the sunglasses she still kept on her desk now a sleek wooden thing, a gift from my first bonus perched on her head like a forgotten accessory. I'd carry her to bed, careful not to crease the pages, and she'd mumble something about pleats or pockets before drifting back, her hair tickling my arm. Weekends were our compromise. We'd run in Central Park, her ponytail bouncing ahead of me, or wander the Met, her pointing out details in Renaissance dresses I'd never notice. See how the gold thread curves here like a heartbeat. Sometimes we'd visit her studio, where she'd made friends with the fabric store owners down the block, who'd let her rummage through remnant bins like a kid in a candy store. "Jack, feel this," she'd say, pressing a piece of cashmere to my cheek, "it's like wearing a cloud." I'm making a coat for a woman who has had a hard year. She deserves to feel soft, you know. I loved seeing her like that, passionate, focused, the sunglasses nowhere in sight. But as the months went on, some days started to feel less like a promise and more like a deadline. My trips to London and Tokyo grew longer, my nights at the office later. I'd miss her studio shows, her late-night rants about fashion magazines that ignored real women's bodies, the way she'd trace patterns on my back while we watched old movies. One night, I came home from a 2-week trip to Frankfurt, jet-lagged, and craving her laugh. The apartment was dark, but her studio light glowed in the corner. I found her there, hunched over her sewing machine, a half-finished dress in royal blue pooling at her feet. Her hair was tied back with a threadbare ribbon, and she wore my old Columbia sweatshirt, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows, no sunglasses, just tired eyes that lit up when she saw me. "Hey," she said, standing up too quickly, knocking over a cup of cold coffee. "I didn't hear you come in. I was finishing this." She gestured to the dress, which had delicate wing-like pleats at the shoulders, the same ones from that first napkin sketch, now brought to life. I stepped closer, running a hand over the fabric. It was silk, just like she described that night in the diner, shimmering softly under the lamp. "It's beautiful," I said, meaning it, but my voice felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's for a client in Chicago. She's a lawyer, just made partner." I wanted her to feel unstoppable. She paused, biting her lip, a habit she had since the diner days when she was nervous to share her work. "Do you think it's too much the pleats? I mean. Or is it?" "Perfect," I said, cutting her off, because I was tired, because the jet lag was hitting me, because I didn't have the words to explain how much this dress, how much she, still took my breath away. "It's going to be perfect, Lynn. You're a genius." She nodded, turning back to the sewing machine, but not before I saw her blink quickly, her fingers brushing the corner of her eye. I thought she was just tired, or maybe emotional about the dress after all, we'd both been working so hard. I didn't realize then that the sunglasses had started to reappear in subtle ways, resting on her desk when she didn't want me to see her frustration, perched on her head when she walked to the subway, as if she needed a shield even from the sunlit streets of Manhattan. That winter, we bought tickets to Paris her first time, my fourth for work. I promised we'd spend a day at the Louvre, wander the March Auxiliary Puces for vintage buttons, maybe even have a fancy dinner. But 2 days before we were set to leave, my boss called, a last-minute merger in Hong Kong. I was needed on the next flight. I found Lynn in her studio, packing her suitcase with careful folds, too careful, like she was trying not to rip the fabric of reality. "I'm sorry," I said, for the 100th time, "it's just this could be the big one, you know, the one that gets me that promotion, the one that lets us finally buy that summer house in the Hamptons," she finished, a faint smile on her face. She pulled the sunglasses from her desk drawer and slid them on, hiding her eyes completely. "It's okay, Jack. I'll go alone. Maybe I'll find inspiration in Paris without you." I laughed, relieved she wasn't angry, and kissed her forehead, missing the way her eyes used to meet mine when I did that. "That's my girl," I said. "Take lots of pictures. And hey, maybe pick up a pair of real designer sunglasses while you're there. Those thrift store ones are falling apart." She didn't say anything, just zipped her suitcase and walked to the door, the sunglasses catching the hallway light. I didn't see the way her hand trembled as she grabbed the handle, or the single tear that might have slipped beneath the frames if there was one at all. When she came back from Paris, she had a new sketchbook filled with ideas, and a vintage silk scarf she bought for me, embroidered with tiny birds in flight. But the sunglasses stayed on more often now, even indoors, even when we talked. And the dress with the winged pleats, it sold out in a week, but she never wore it herself. Looking back, I realized that when the crack started small, almost invisible, like a seam coming undone. We were still moving forward, checking off boxes on our someday list, but somewhere along the way, we stopped looking at each other. And Lynn's sunglasses, once a joke, a symbol of her dreams, had become something else, a barrier, a shield, a way to hide the parts of herself she feared I no longer had time to see. Part 3. The 1990 Christmas Party. The Christmas party that year was the kind of event where everyone wore their most expensive smile polished, practiced, just a little too bright. The office had rented a ballroom in a midtown hotel, the kind with crystal chandeliers that cast prismatic shadows over linen tablecloth starched stiffer than my first boss's collar. I'd been promoted to vice president that fall, and Lynn had agreed to wear one of her own designs, a deep burgundy silk dress with a sweetheart neckline and a subtle A-line skirt, edged with delicate beadwork that glimmered like frozen wine in the light. She hesitated by the mirror that night, adjusting the strap of her clutch. "Are you sure this isn't too bold?" she asked, smoothing a hand over the fabric. I remember thinking she looked like a Renaissance queen, her hair swept up in a loose twist, a single curl escaping to brush her cheek. No sunglasses, she left them on the dresser, a rare choice. "You look perfect," I said, kissing her temple, already distracted by the need to schmooze partners and clients. "They love you." They didn't. At least, not Richard, the senior partner who'd taken me under his wing. He cornered us by the champagne tower, his laugh booming, his hand clapping my shoulder a little too hard. "Jack, my boy. Finally, meet the mystery designer," he said, eyeing Lynn's dress. "Heard you're quite the artist. This one's unique. Bold color for a corporate event, don't you think? Reminds me of my wife's favorite armchair velvet, very comfortable." I laughed politely, already calculating how to steer the conversation to the merger we'd just closed. But Lynn went still beside me, her smile freezing. "Comfortable is underrated," she said, her voice steady but tight. "Especially when it lets you move through the world without feeling like you're wearing a straitjacket." Richard guffawed, missing the edge in her tone. "Spirited. I like that. But tell me, do you ever design anything simpler, something our wives could actually wear to the country club? This looks like it belongs on a runway, not a dinner table." I saw her swallow, her throat bobbing. Without a word, she reached into her clutch and pulled out the tortoise-shell sunglasses, the ones she'd started carrying everywhere again, even to events like this. She slid them on, instantly masking her eyes, but not before I caught the flicker of her, quick as a moth against a flame. "Excuse me," she said, her voice too light, "I need to freshen up." I should have followed her. I should have said, "Richard, you're an idiot, and my wife is more talented than your entire country club wardrobe." But instead, I stayed, chatting about stock options and Caribbean vacations, because that's what you did at these parties. You leaned into the noise, the shallow compliments, the unspoken rules of who mattered and who didn't. It was nearly an hour before I found her on the hotel's rooftop terrace, wrapped in her coat, staring at the skyline. The air was frigid, but she didn't seem to notice, her breath visible in short, sharp bursts. The sunglasses were still on, though the party was indoors. Though it was night, she wore them like armor now, a way to keep the world at bay. "Hey," I said, approaching carefully. You okay, Richard S. Don't let him. Don't let him. What? She interrupted, turning to face me, the sunglasses catching the city lights. Don't let him see. He's right that my designs are just unique, something to laugh at over champagne. Her voice wavered, but her posture was rigid, like she was holding herself together with sheer will. I sighed, reaching for her arm. He doesn't know anything about fashion, Lynn. He buys his suits off a rack. You're better than. Am I? She said, pulling away. Or am I just the girl from the diner who got lucky, who thinks she can pretend to be a designer because she sews on a 200 machine in a Brooklyn studio? She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. You used to see me, Jack. Back then, in the diner you saw the girl behind the sunglasses, the one who had dreams. Now you just see what fits into your world, don't you? The perfect wife who wears your success like a trophy, but doesn't make waves. I didn't know what to say. The truth was, I had stopped seeing the details, the way she bit her lip when she was nervous, the way she hummed off-key when she sewed, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about fabric. I was too busy climbing, too busy chasing the next promotion, the next bonus, the next status symbol. And somewhere along the way, I'd let her become a side character in my own story, instead of the co-author she'd always been. We should go back inside, I said finally, not wanting to confront the truth in her words. People will notice we're gone. She didn't move. You go back, she said, pulling the sunglasses down slightly, just enough for me to see the wetness beneath her lashes. I'll wait here until the taxi comes. I left her there, standing in the cold, the burgundy dress a splash of color against the monochrome night. When we got home, she went straight to the bedroom, pulling the sunglasses off and tossing them onto the dresser with more force than necessary. I thought she'd cry, but she didn't. She just lay there, staring at the ceiling, while I pretended to read reports, the weight of her silence heavier than any argument. The next morning, the sunglasses were back on her desk, but the dress was folded neatly in her studio, never to be worn again. And Richard, he kept calling me kid, clapping my shoulder, oblivious to the rift he'd helped widen. I should have known then that some wounds don't bleed, they just settle, quiet and deep, like a stone at the bottom of a lake. Lynn's smile stayed bright at the next parties, her designs grew more successful, but the sunglasses became a permanent fixture, a barrier I no longer had the courage to lift. We were still Jack and Lynn, the golden couple with the Park Avenue apartment and the Brooklyn studio. But behind her sunglasses, the girl who'd drawn dresses on diner napkins was fading, replaced by someone I was no longer sure I knew. And I kept climbing, telling myself the view would be worth it, that someday we'd find our way back to each other. Someday, as it turns out, is a tricky thing. It doesn't tell you when the climb becomes a fall, or when the person beside you has already started walking a different path. Part 4. The rainy Long Island weekend. Our Long Island house was meant to be a retreat, colonial charm, a greenhouse for Lynn's roses, my study overlooking the Sound. By 1992, Her greenhouse smelled of stubborn blooms, while my office hummed with faxes and stock charts. The outside world kept at bay. That May, rain poured for days, blurring the line between sky and sea. Lynn spent mornings in the greenhouse, sunglasses on her head despite the gray, hands dirted by seedlings. I stayed in my study, buried in recession projections, barely noticing when she knocked on the door. "Beach walk?" she asked, voice tentative. "Tide's low." I didn't look up. "Not now, Carl needs these numbers perfect." She left without a word. Later, I found her at the shore, yellow raincoat billowing, umbrella abandoned. She stood at the water's edge, sunglasses facing the waves, a silhouette against the storm. I called her name, but the wind swallowed it. She bent to pick up a shell, then tossed it back, her movements mechanical. When she turned, her mouth was a flat line, sunglasses hiding whatever might be even in her eyes. "Ready to go in?" she asked, voice empty. Dinner was silent, reheated pasta cooling on our plates. She went to the greenhouse, I stayed in my study, promising later that never came. I fell asleep at my desk, waking to a cold house. Her sunglasses lay on the bathroom counter, lenses speckled with what might be even rain or tears. I wiped them, feeling the weight of all we hadn't said. Next morning, she packed quickly, sunglasses atop her head. "Studio work," she said, not meeting my gaze. "Client needs revisions." I didn't offer to drive her, didn't ask which client. Watched from the porch as the taxi took her, her coat a bright spot fading into the gray. In the greenhouse, I found a new sketch, a woman in a raincoat, head down, sunglasses masking her face, alone on a beach. One word at the bottom: stagnant. We were both hiding, me behind spreadsheets, her behind those sunglasses. Stagnant, adrift in a life we built but no longer recognized. I thought it was a phase, a storm that would pass. I didn't know storms can settle in, turning everything gray, until the sun feels like a distant memory. Part 5. Labels on the packing boxes. The first sign was the stack of boxes in the hallway, each labeled in Lynn's precise cursive: studio samples fragile, winter coats SF, Mom's china handle with care. The SF caught my eye: San Francisco. We talked about California once, years ago, when she dreamed of showing her designs at Neiman Marcus in Union Square. But that was before the Hamptons house, before my corner office, before the silence that had settled between us like a permanent fog. It was April 1995, a cool spring morning when the air still smelled of last night's rain. I'd come home early for once, skipping a lunch meeting to surprise her. Instead, I found the apartment half empty, our life reduced to cardboard and packing tape. In the bedroom, her suitcase lay open on the bed, filled with neatly rolled clothes, including that old Columbia sweatshirt she'd stolen from me, the one with the hole in the elbow she refused to throw away. Tucked beneath the clothes was the tortoise-shell sunglasses, the raft in the ivory from our wedding day, frayed at the edges but still tied in a perfect bow. I stood there, holding the sunglasses, remembering the day she'd drawn that first dress on a diner napkin, the way she'd laughed when they slid down her nose. Now, the bow felt like a mockery, a symbol of promises we'd broken without meaning to. She found me there, leaning against the dresser, the sunglasses in my hand. "I was going to tell you tonight," she said, her voice steady but soft, like she'd rehearsed this 100 times. "A boutique in San Francisco wants to carry my line. They offered me a studio space, a chance to show at Fashion Week West." I nodded, unable to speak. The sunglasses felt heavy in my palm, their lenses catching the light from the window, still hiding her eyes even now. "When do you leave?" I finally managed. "Tomorrow morning." She turned to the suitcase, adjusting a sleeve that was out of place. "I didn't want to drag it out, Jack. We both know, we've been living in different worlds for a long time." I thought of the Long Island house, the greenhouse with the wilting roses, the Christmas party where she'd first worn those sunglasses as armor. She was right, we'd become strangers who shared a bed, who said good morning over coffee but didn't ask how the other's day was really going. "You could stay," I said, the words hollow even as I spoke them. "We could try again. Go to counseling, take a vacation, like we used to talk about." She smiled, a sad, tiny thing, and took the sunglasses from me, sliding them on. The sunlight threw the cast grid like shadows on the lenses, masking whatever was behind them. Tears, I suspected, though her voice stayed steady. "You don't want to try, Jack. You want things to go back to how they were, but we can't go back. We've both changed too much." I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, the way I used to do when we were still us. She leaned into my touch for a second, then stepped back, grabbing her suitcase. "I left the lease for the apartment in your study. The rest, I think you know what to do." At the door, she paused, her hand on the knob, the sunglasses still firmly in place. "You remember that first night in the diner?" she said, almost to herself. "You said my movie would be about a girl who didn't need sunglasses anymore. Turns out, that girl was a dream. The real me needed them to hide how much it hurt to realize we were never going to be the people we thought we'd become." I opened my mouth to say something. "I'm sorry, don't go, I still love you," but the words stuck. She smiled again, that same warm smile that had drawn me in a decade ago, but this time, I knew it was a goodbye. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me with the boxes, the silence, and the sunglasses in my hand. I turned them over, seeing the faint scratch on the left lens she'd gotten the day we'd gone hiking in the Catskills, laughing as she tripped over a root. Back then, the scratch had seemed like a battle scar, a mark of an adventure shared. Now, it was just a flaw in glass, a reminder of all the moments we'd lost. I went to the window, watching her hail a taxi, her hair blowing in the wind, the sunglasses a constant presence on her face. As the car pulled away, I thought of the sketch she'd drawn that night in the diner, the woman with the sunglasses on her head, walking toward a future that looked bright and clear. But for us, The future had become a series of missed moments, hidden tears, and sunglasses that had never really hidden anything at all. She'd been right, we couldn't go back. And maybe, deep down, I'd known for a long time that she'd been the one holding us together, while I'd been too busy climbing to notice she'd stopped following. I set the sunglasses on the dresser, next to the ivory still tied in its perfect bow. Somewhere outside, a taxi horn honked, and a bird sang a brief, beautiful note before falling silent. And just like that, the woman who taught me to see the world through her dreams was gone, leaving behind only boxes, memories, and a pair of sunglasses that had finally revealed the truth. Sometimes, the people we love most are the ones we've stopped seeing. Part 6. Empty Spaces and Stolen Scents. The first week after she left, I kept expecting to hear the hum of her sewing machine at 2 a.m. or the clatter of her coffee cup as she rummaged for sugar in the pantry. Instead, the apartment was a museum of absences, her silk scarves no longer draped over the couch, her sketchbooks gone from the coffee table, even the scent of jasmine tea that had lingered in the kitchen vanished, replaced by the sterile smell of my too strong cologne. I avoided her studio for 3 days, then one evening, unable to stand the silence, I turned the doorknob slowly, as if afraid of waking a ghost. The room was mostly empty, but a single cardboard box sat on her desk, labeled for Jack Don't Throw Away in her messy scrawl. Inside, the diner napkin sketch from our first night, framed in cheap wood, a cassette tape of Joni Mitchell's Blue, the case cracked, and a folded piece of paper with a single sentence, "The first dress you loved, the one with the winged pleats, hangs in the back of my closet. It was always yours." I found a dress where she said, buried beneath my suits, navy silk, the shoulder pleats still stiff with starch, like they'd been waiting to take flight. I held it to my chest, breathing in the faint scent of her patchouli and ink, a smell that hadn't changed since the diner days. For a moment, I could see her there, leaning over the sewing machine, humming off-key, sunglasses sliding down her nose as she grinned at me. Then the memory faded, leaving only the empty hanger beside it, swinging gently in the closet's draft. Work became a haze of numbers and late nights, but even the stock market's crashes couldn't distract me from the way her absence echoed in every corner. I'd catch myself buying 2 coffees in the morning, then staring at the extra cup until it cooled. I'd dial her old number by mistake, forgetting it was disconnected, the recorded voice saying the subscriber you have reached is no longer in service, like a metaphor for us. One rainy Tuesday, 6 months later, a package arrived from San Francisco. No return address, just my name in her handwriting. Inside was a tailor's dummy, small and unassuming, with a note pinned to its chest, "For your office. So you'll always have a model, even if she's not real." Beneath it lay a folded shirt, linen, pale blue, the cuffs embroidered with tiny birds in flight, just like the jacket she'd worn the night we first kissed. I wore the shirt to work the next day, ignoring the raised eyebrows from colleagues who were used to my starched whites. The linen felt soft against my skin, breathable, alive, nothing like the stiff suits I'd grown to hate. That evening, as I loosened my tie, I noticed a tiny tag inside the collar, for Jack, who taught me to dream out loud. L. I sat at my desk, the tailor's dummy standing in the corner like a silent companion, and pulled out the diner napkin sketch. The woman in the drawing still wore those sunglasses on her head, her dress billowing as if caught in a wind that carried her towards something bright. I wondered if, in San Francisco, Lynn had finally taken off her sunglasses for good, if the sun out there was warm enough to make hiding unnecessary. I called her that night, hands shaking. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her voice cautious, familiar. Hello. Lynn, I said, and that was all I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. On the other end, she sighed, a soft, sad sound that felt like a hug across the miles. You got the shirt, she said, not a question. Does it fit? Perfectly, I managed, staring at the tailor's dummy, at the sketch, at the empty space where she should be even. Feels like you never left. She was quiet for a moment, and I imagined her wearing those sunglasses, hiding her eyes as she chose her words. Some things don't leave, Jack. They just become part of the fabric. We talked for an hour, the longest we'd spoken in years. She told me about her studio by the bay, the way the fog rolled in like a giant gray cat, the woman who bought that first winged pleat dress and worn it to her daughter's graduation. I told her about the linen shirt, about how I started leaving the office at 6, about the roses I planted in the Long Island greenhouse, stubborn and wild, just like hers. We didn't say I miss you or I'm sorry, those words felt too big, too raw, after all that had happened. But as we hung up, I held the diner napkin to my chest, feeling the faint indent of her pen strokes, and for the first time since she left, the silence in the apartment didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a pause, a breath before the next verse. The tailor's dummy stayed in my office, the linen shirt in my closet, the sunglasses on my dresser. And every morning, when I put on that shirt, I'd run my finger over the embroidered birds, wondering if somewhere, across the country, Lynn was drawing a new design, maybe even smiling without her sunglasses, letting the sun hit her eyes. Loss, I was learning, isn't always a shattering. Sometimes it's a slow unraveling, a thread pulled gently until you see the pattern of what you've had all along, love, not as a destination, but as a fabric woven, flawed, resilient, even when the weavers have gone their separate ways. Part 7. 3 years later, the Bay Area breeze. It was a crisp October day in 1998 when I stepped off the plane in San Francisco, the air sharp with salt and eucalyptus, the kind of clarity that makes you feel like you've just opened a window on a stagnant room. I'd been invited, no, summoned by a text from Lynn. Neiman S is carrying the fall collection. Come see the dresses that finally grew wings. I'd kept my distance after that first phone call, letting the years stretch between us like a bridge we were both too cautious to cross. But her words, playful yet pointed, pulled at something in me, the same tug I'd felt that first night in the diner, when she offered me a napkin sketch and a promise of something real. Her studio was a sunlit loft in the Mission District, walls lined with mood boards, fabric swatches in ocean blues and fog grays, photos of women laughing in doorways, a single diner napkin framed and hung near her desk, the one from our first night, preserved like a relic. She stood at the center, chatting with a buyer, her hair silvered at the temples, a pair of round, gold-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, no sunglasses. My breath caught. She'd always been beautiful, but this was different, relaxed, unguarded, the way she'd been in the diner before the world taught her to hide. When she saw me, she smiled, a slow, familiar curve that reached her eyes, hazel still, flecked with gold, no shadows behind them now. "Jack," she said, stepping forward, hesitated, then hugged me, brief but warm. Her sweater smelled of cedar and laundry detergent, a scent entirely her own, no trace of the patchouli from years past. "Thought you might chicken out. Couldn't he miss the wings taking flight?" I said, gesturing to the rack of dresses, silks and linens in muted tones, each with delicate pleats at the shoulders, like whispered memories of that first design. She led me through the studio, explaining how she'd started incorporating sustainable fabrics, how her clients were women who've lived a life, not just shopped for one. Her hands moved as they used to, passionate and precise, but there was a new ease to her, a lightness I hadn't seen since the diner days. The sunglasses, I noticed, were nowhere in sight. "Where are they?" I asked finally, when we were alone, sipping tea by the window that overlooked the bay. "The tortoise-shell ones. The ones you always wore." She laughed, a rich, throaty sound, and pointed to a shelf above her desk, where they rested among spools of thread and vintage buttons. "Retired them 2 years ago. Turns out, West Coast sun is gentler on the eyes. Or maybe I just got tired of hiding." She paused, studying me, the way she used to when she was sketching a new design. "You look different too. Softer. Less like a spreadsheet in a suit." I smiled, thinking of the linen shirts I now preferred, the roses I'd managed to keep alive in the Long Island greenhouse, the way I'd started leaving work early to walk along the Sound, just to watch the sunset. "You were right, back then. About us needing to change. I just took longer to figure it out. We didn't talk about the past, the missed anniversaries, the silent dinners, the sunglasses that had come to symbolize everything we'd lost. Instead, we talked about the present, her upcoming show, my plans to volunteer at a community garden, the way the Bay fog reminded her of the diner's early mornings, when the world outside was still sleepy and full of possibility. As the afternoon wore on, she pulled out a new sketchbook, flipping to a page titled "For Jack 2020 Vision." It was a man's coat, tailored but relaxed, in a fabric that looked like it had been washed 100 times, soft and inviting. At the collar, tiny birds in flight, embroidered in the same style as the shirt she'd sent years ago. "For when you finally visit in winter," she said, tapping the sketch. "No starch, no stiffness. Just comfort." I took the book, tracing the birds with my finger, feeling the indent of her pen. "You never stopped seeing me," Did you? I said quietly. Even when I stopped seeing you. She didn't answer right away, looking out at the bay where a ship glided past, leaving a gentle wake. I saw the man who helped me believe my dreams were worth chasing, she said finally. The rest, well, we both had to grow into who we needed to be. Separately, I guess. That night, we ate at a tiny taqueria she loved, laughing over margaritas and salsa that was spicier than either of us could handle. She didn't mention the sunglasses on the shelf, and I didn't ask. They felt like a chapter closed, a symbol of a younger, more fragile version of us, now preserved in that framed napkin and the embroidered birds on my shirt. As I left the studio, she pressed the tortoise-shell sunglasses into my hand, their weight familiar yet foreign. Take them, she said. They belong to both our stories now. I kept them on the dashboard of my rental car, letting the California sun shine through the lenses, casting warm, amber shadows on the sea. Driving across the Golden Gate Bridge that evening, the fog rolling in like an old friend, I realized something. The sunglasses hadn't hidden her tears. They'd been a reminder that tears, like dreams, are part of the journey. And sometimes, letting them fall is the only way to see clearly again. Back in New York, I placed the sunglasses next to the diner sketch on my desk, a bridge between then and now. Lynn and I wouldn't go back to what we'd been, but we'd found a new kind of connection, gentle, respectful, rooted in the knowledge that some loves don't end, they just transform, like fabric reshaped into something stronger, more beautiful for the wearer. The next morning, I wore that linen shirt with the embroidered birds, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was wearing a costume. I felt like myself, Jack, the man who loved a woman with dreams as big as the Manhattan skyline, and who learned, too late, that sometimes the greatest adventure is learning to see what's been in front of you all along. Part 8. Postcards from the New Millennium. The new millennium arrived with a whisper, not a bang, at least for me. I spent Y2K Eve alone in the Long Island house, watching the rain streak the windows, the tortoise-shell sunglasses resting on the windowsill like a silent observer of time's passing. Lynn had sent a postcard from Paris, where she was debuting a collection inspired by the way light hits cobblestones after midnight. The back was scribbled with updates. Met a retired dancer who wants a dress that feels like floating. Bought a vintage sewing machine that sounds like a heartbeat. Still no sunglasses. Sunlight here is too polite to need armor. I kept her postcards in a shoebox under my bed, alongside the diner napkin, the cassette tape, and the linen shirt she'd made. They arrived irregularly, sometimes monthly, sometimes after months of silence, each one a snapshot of a life I'd once been part of, now unfolding in vibrant, foreign colors. There was a postcard from Tokyo, where she'd taught a workshop on sustainable design, another from Santa Fe, featuring a sketch of a desert-inspired coat with fringe like sun rays. Saw a woman wearing your old Columbia sweatshirt at the market, she'd written. Almost yelled, "That's mine," before remembering it's yours no longer. Our conversations were rare but gentle, like old friends who've accepted the gaps between visits. We'd talk on birthdays, sometimes holidays, our voices warm but cautious, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace we built. Once, she called just to describe a sunset over the bay, how the colors had reminded her of the silk in that first winged fleet dress. I didn't mention that I'd started painting in my free time landscapes mostly, though every now and then, a figure in a sunlit studio would emerge, faceless but familiar, a pair of sunglasses resting on the desk. In 2003, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a tailored suit, charcoal gray, but soft, the kind that draped instead of constricting. A note pinned to the lapel, for board meetings that feel like funerals. Wear it with the linen shirt, trust me. I laughed at the bluntness, recognizing the touch of the woman who once called corporate suits straitjackets. The suit fit perfectly, as if she measured me in her mind, every stitch a reminder that some people never stop seeing you, even when years have passed. That fall, I visited San Francisco again, this time for her 20th anniversary show. The venue was a converted warehouse, strings of Edison bulbs hanging from the ceiling, models gliding through the crowd in designs that blended elegance with ease, flowing dresses, structured coats, even a line of menswear that included the charcoal suit, now displayed beside a linen shirt with embroidered birds. Lynn met me at the door, wearing a simple black dress and those gold-rimmed glasses, no trace of the tortoise-shell sunglasses. "You're wearing it," she said, nodding at the suit, a grin tugging at her lips. "Told you it'd look better without a tie." I'd forgotten how much her laughter filled a room, how her presence made even a crowded space feel intimate. She introduced me to her team as an old collaborator, and when someone asked about our history, she said, "We designed each other's first real costumes. Mine just happened to be made of silk." After the show, we sat on the loading dock, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the fog roll in. She pulled out a worn sketchbook, flipping to a page titled "What We Carried." It was a collage, a diner napkin, a wedding ribbon, a pair of sunglasses, all woven into the outline of two figures walking away from each other, their paths diverging but connected by a thread of embroidery. "For the memoir I'll never write," she said, tracing the sunglasses in the sketch. "They used to feel like a symbol of loss, you know, but now, they're just a part of the story. The part where we learn to see without hiding." I took her hand, squeezing it gently, marveling at how familiar it felt, how little words were needed. The wine was warm, the fog was thick, and somewhere in the distance, a ship's horn moaned, a sound that felt like both goodbye and hello. We didn't revisit the what-ifs or the regrets. There was no grand reconciliation, no promise to try again. Instead, we existed in a space of quiet understanding, two people who loved each other fiercely, then learned to love each other differently, with grace, with gratitude, with the knowledge that some connections are too deep to break, even when the shape of them changes. As I left that night, she pressed a small box into my hand. Inside was a pair of sunglasses, sleek, modern, but with a tortoise-shell pattern that nodded to the past. "For your morning walks by the Sound," she'd written on the card. "Sunrise deserves to be seen, but eyes deserve to be protected too. Balance, you know." I wore them the next day, standing on the beach where Lynn had tossed that shell years ago. The sun rose gently, casting golden light through the lenses, turning the world into a warm, soft focus. And as the waves rolled in, I thought of her words, balance. Not hiding, not exposing, but finding a way to move through the light and the shadow, carrying the past without being defined by it. The sunglasses now live in my coat pocket, ready for walks and flights and the occasional rainy day. They're a reminder that love, like fabric, can be remade and woven into something new, yet still carrying the threads of what came before. And maybe, in the end, that's the greatest design of all, a life stitched together with courage, compassion, and the quiet strength to let go, so that someday, you might just find your way back to seeing each other clearly. Part 9. The Box in the Attic. It was a lazy Sunday in 2005, the kind where autumn leaves tap against the window like old friends waving goodbye, that I decided to clean out the Long Island attic. Dust motes danced in the slanted sunlight, and there, tucked behind a trunk of college textbooks, I found a cardboard box labeled Lynn's Odds and Ends handle gently in my own messy handwriting, dating back to the year she left. I pried open the flaps, greeted by the scent of aged paper and lavender sachets, her trick for keeping moths away. Inside, a jumble of relics from another life. There was the ivory from our wedding, now yellowed at the edges, a stack of her old sketchbooks, their spines cracked, and, at the bottom, a Ziploc bag containing the tortoise-shell sunglasses original case, frayed but intact. I pulled out a sketchbook from 1988, the year we moved into the Park Avenue apartment. Flipping through, I found designs I'd never seen: flowy maternity dresses with hidden pockets, tailored blazers with embroidered linings, each labeled with tiny notes: for Jack's sister, due in March, for Mrs. Goldstein at the diner, who deserves something soft. She'd been dreaming of a family, of community, while I'd been dreaming of corner offices and stock options. The realization didn't hurt anymore, it just was, like a scar that had healed into a story. Tucked between the pages was a photo from our honeymoon in Maine, Lynn laughing, sunglasses perched on her head, holding up a lobster she'd caught. It had been bought from a fisherman down the dock. I ran a thumb over her face in the photo, remembering the way she'd insisted on hiking in sandals, the way her laughter had echoed off the rocky cliffs. Back then, the sunglasses had been a prop for her movie star fantasies, not a shield. Another item caught my eye, a small velvet pouch labeled Jack's Cufflinks 1990 Christmas. Inside were the silver cufflinks I'd given her that year, engraved with tiny sewing machines. She'd never worn them, claiming they were too fancy for a diner girl, but here they were, preserved like treasure. I wondered if she'd kept them all those years, a silent nod to a love that had tried, even if it hadn't lasted. The most surprising find was a letter, written in her cursive on stationery from the San Francisco boutique, dated 1996, 1 year after she'd left. Dear Jack, it began, I saw a couple in the park today, arguing over a picnic blanket. She was wearing sunglasses, he was wearing a tie that clashed with his shirt, and I thought, that's us, a decade ago. Fierce, flawed, believing the future had to be perfect to be worth having. I miss you, but I don't miss that version of us. I hope you're finding your own kind of perfect. I sat on the attic floor, the letter in my hand, listening to the wind rattle the eaves. So much time had passed, yet her words felt like they'd been written yesterday. The perfect she'd mentioned wasn't the Park Avenue apartment or the Hamptons house, it was the courage to let go, to grow into selves that didn't need costumes or shields. I placed the letter back in the box, alongside the cufflinks and the photo. The tortoise-shell sunglasses case stayed on my desk that night, empty but meaningful, a reminder that memories aren't meant to be locked away. They're threads in the fabric of who we are, worn, yes, but still vibrant, still part of the design. The next morning, I drove into the city, the new sunglasses Lynn had given me resting on the dashboard. I stopped at that old diner on the corner, now a trendy coffee shop with artisanal lattes and minimalist decor. The counter where we first talked was still there, though the formica had been replaced with polished wood. I ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and sat at the same stool, feeling the ghost of her laughter beside me, the echo of a deal made on a napkin so long ago. Life, I realized, isn't a series of perfect stitches. It's a patchwork of dreams chased, of love lost and found in new forms, of sunglasses that start as props and end as symbols of courage. And as I sipped the coffee burnt, just like I remembered, I smiled at the universe's quiet humor. The girl who wanted to be seen had taught me, in the end, to see myself. Part 10. The Retrospective at the Garment District. It was a crisp February day in 2010 when Lynn called to say she was curating a retrospective of her career at the New York Garment District Museum. They want to include the dress, she said, her voice soft with nostalgia. The navy one with the winged pleats. The one that started it all. I flew in from Boston, where I'd taken a job at a smaller firm, trading skyscrapers for a view of the Charles River. The museum smelled of aged fabric and lemon polish, the kind of scent that instantly takes you back to your childhood closet. Lynn stood by a mannequin dressed in that first iconic dress, her hand resting lightly on the silk, gold-rimmed glasses catching the spotlights. Still looks like it could take flight, I said, coming up beside her. She smiled, not taking her eyes off the dress. Funny how a piece of fabric can hold so much dreams, heartbreak, the weight of a decade. She turned to me, her gaze steady, no trace of the sunglasses that had once shielded her. They wanted to display these too, she said, gesturing to a glass case nearby. Inside lay the tortoise-shell sunglasses, the diner napkin sketch, and the wedding ribbon, arranged like artifacts from a bygone era. I studied the display, struck by how ordinary these objects looked now: just a pair of sunglasses, a piece of ribbon, a napkin with a doodle. Yet together, they told the story of two kids in a diner, weaving a future out of coffee stains and laughter. You ever miss the armor? I asked, nodding at the sunglasses. Lynn laughed, a low, warm sound. Only on days when the world feels too bright. But mostly, I miss the girl who thought she needed them. She taught me courage, you know, the kind that comes from believing someone sees the real you, even when you're not sure it exists. We wandered through the exhibit, past racks of her designs labeled with years and memories, the burgundy dress from the 1990 Christmas party now titled Armored Grace, the linen shirts with bird embroidery Migration, even the charcoal suit from her menswear line Soft Power. At the end of the hall, a video loop played interviews with her clients, women describing how her clothes had made them feel seen, heard, present. Remember when Richard called my designs comfortable, Lynn said, pointing to a sleek black coat labeled Uncomfortable Truths. Turns out, comfort's overrated. Sometimes you need a dress that says, I am here, and I'm not shrinking for anyone. I smiled, thinking of the woman in the video who worn that winged pleat dress to her daughter's graduation. Lynn had always known how to sew confidence into fabric, long before she learned to wear her own without sunglasses. That evening, we dined at a bistro around the corner from the old diner, now a boutique selling artisanal candles, but the neon sign still flickered 24 hours in the window. Over steak frites and a bottle of Burgundy, she pulled out a new sketchbook, flipping to a page titled Epilogue. It showed two figures sitting at a diner counter, one wearing sunglasses atop their head, the other in a linen shirt, their hands reaching for each other across a mug of coffee. No labels, no dates, just a simple, warm scene. For the exhibit, I asked. She shook her head. For us. Life's not a retrospective, Jack. It's a never-ending sketch, scratches, revisions, moments where you think you've ruined the page, but then a new line comes along and makes it whole. As we walked to the subway, she looped her arm through mine, a gesture so natural it could be even yesterday or decades ago. The winter air bit at our cheeks, but the streetlights glowed soft and golden, casting long shadows that stretched toward the future. At the station, she pressed a small package into my hand wrapped in tissue paper, the scent of lavender faint but familiar. Open it later, she said, kissing my cheek. Consider it a late anniversary gift. Inside, when I unwrapped it, was a pair of sunglasses, round, wire-rimmed, inscribed with "To Jack, who taught me to look forward." They weren't the tortoise-shell ones, nor the sleek modern pair from San Francisco. They were new, yet somehow timeless, like a bridge between all the versions of us that had existed. I wore them the next morning, walking along the Hudson, the sun low but bright, turning the river into a ribbon of fire. Somewhere behind me, a diner bell jingled, and for a moment, I could be sworn I heard her laugh, the clatter of a coffee mug, the scratch of a pen on a napkin. Life, I thought, isn't about the sunglasses we wear or the shields we build. It's about the people who see past them, who help us realize that the bravest thing we can do is let the light in, even if it means showing the tears, even if it means starting over, one stitch at a time. Part 11. The Seaside Studio in 2015. By 2015, I traded the stock market for a garden, literally. I volunteered at a community plot in Brooklyn, where tomatoes grew in rusty buckets and kids chased ladybugs across basil leaves. Lynn had moved her studio to a cottage by the Northern California coast, where the fog rolled in like a silent partner, and her designs had taken on the easy elegance of salt water and sunlight. She invited me to stay for a week, her note scrawled on a piece of seaweed printed fabric: "Bring those wire-rimmed sunglasses, they match the horizon here." The cottage smelled of cedar and sea salt, her sewing machine set up by a window that overlooked the tide pools. On my first morning, she handed me a cup of coffee and pointed to a mannequin dressed in a linen dress the color of storm clouds, its hem dotted with tiny shell embroideries. "For women who weathered storms," she said. "Soft enough to heal, strong enough to keep standing." We spent our days walking the beach, her sandals kicking up wet sand, my sneakers sinking into the mud flats. She no longer needed sunglasses. Her eyes, now crinkled with laugh lines, met the sun directly, squinting into the brightness with a kind of fearless ease. But I wore mine, the wire rims warm against my temples, watching as she bent to collect driftwood and smooth stones, her movements unhurried, deliberate, like she was gathering inspiration from the earth itself. One evening, as the sun dipped below the waves, she pulled out a leather-bound sketchbook titled Tides. Inside were designs inspired by the ocean, dresses that flowed like currents, coats with collars shaped like seagull wings, even a pair of men's trousers with stitchwork that mimicked the ebb and flow of waves. And there, on the last page, a familiar sight, a diner napkin, sketched in faint pencil, with two figures sharing a mug of coffee, one wearing sunglasses, the other a linen shirt, their shadows stretching toward the sea. "Still revisiting that first night?" I asked, tracing the pencil lines. She nodded, nestling into a weathered Adirondack chair beside me. "It's not about the past anymore, Jack. It's about the way certain moments become anchors. They don't hold you in place, but remind you of where you came from, how much you've grown." She paused, watching a lone seagull glide overhead. "You ever think about what we tell our younger selves?" I laughed, sipping coffee that had gone cool. "I'd say, stop worrying about the climb. The view from the bottom's not so bad when you're with someone who sees you." Lynn smiled, reaching into her pocket to pull out a small velvet pouch. "Found these in a drawer the other day," she said, handing it to me. Inside were the silver cufflinks from 1990, still polished, still engraved with tiny sewing machines. "I used to think they were a symbol of a love that didn't work out. Now I see them as a promise we may have taken different paths, but we never stopped believing in each other's dreams." That night, I wore the cufflinks to dinner at her favorite seafood shack, where the tables were sticky with tartar sauce and the air smelled of frying batter. She ordered chowder, I ordered fish and chips, and we talked about nothing and everything: her plans to teach a workshop for aspiring designers, my latest victory over a stubborn tomato plant, the way the sea had taught her that even the strongest waves eventually settle, leaving something beautiful in their wake. As we walked back to the cottage, the moon casting a silvery path over the water, I thought of the sunglasses in my pocket, the ones she'd given me in New York, the tortoise-shell pair in the attic, the wire-rimmed ones on my nose. They weren't just accessories, they were milestones, markers of a journey where love had transformed, not faded. Lynn stopped, turning to face me, the ocean breeze tangling her hair. "You know," she said, "I used to hate how those first sunglasses made me feel vulnerable. But now I'm grateful for every crack, every smudge on the lens. They taught me that imperfection is where the light gets in, literally, figuratively. Maybe that's the real lesson." I nodded, understanding at last what she'd been trying to say all those years. The light doesn't need to be feared or hidden from. It's in the interplay of light and shadow, of dreams and reality, that we find our truth. And sometimes, the people who stay with us, even in different ways, are the ones who help us hold that light, steady and sure, through every chapter. The next morning, as I packed my suitcase, I left the silver cufflinks on her desk, alongside a note: "For the next dream you sketch, may it have wings, and may the sun shine right through." Outside, the fog was lifting, revealing a sky so blue it hurt to look at. No sunglasses needed, just the courage to open your eyes and see. Part 12. The Farewell Exhibition in the Golden Hour. The call came in 2020, a year of storms and stillness, when the world seemed to hold its breath. Lynn's voice on the phone was calm, but there was a tremor beneath it: excitement, maybe, or nostalgia. "I'm closing the studio," she said. "Not because I'm tired, but because I want to leave while the story is still warm. And I want you there, Jack. For the final show." The venue was a converted barn in Sonoma, its rafters strung with fairy lights that twinkled like distant stars. As I walked in, I was greeted by a timeline of her career sketches, fabric swatches, even the original diner napkin, framed and lit like a holy relic. But the centerpiece was a rotating platform displaying every iteration of the winged dress, from the 1985 napkin sketch to the 2015 storm cloud linen, each one labeled with a tiny note about the woman who'd worn it. Lynn stood by a glass case containing the tortoise-shell sunglasses, now paired with the wire-rimmed ones she'd given me, a single thread of ivory looping through their arms. "They're like bookends," she said, joining me. "The start, and whatever this is not the end, just a comma." I studied the display, noticing a new sketch tucked beside the sunglasses: two elderly figures sitting on a porch, one wearing sunglasses as a headband, the other holding a watering can, their hands linked over a patchwork quilt. No words, just a date, 2020, and a tiny heart. "For the woman who taught me that every goodbye is just a new kind of hello," she said, tapping the sketch. The show itself was a gentle procession. Models glided through the barn in her most beloved designs, each one introduced by a client's voiceover: "This coat carried me through my divorce. This dress made me feel seen at my son's wedding." When the winged pleat dress came out, worn by a gray-haired model with a smile that could light a room, the audience sighed in unison, a sound like wind through wheat. Afterward, we sat on the barn's creaky porch, sharing a bottle of Pinot Noir from a nearby vineyard. Lynn had traded her usual glasses for the tortoise-shell sunglasses, perched atop her head like a crown of memories. "Remember when we thought success was a corner office and a Hamptons house?" she said, laughing softly. "Turns out, it's a barn full of people who feel seen because of a dress, and a friend who has been there since the diner days. I raised my glass to that, to the way life had unfolded, not in the grand plans we'd made, but in the small, steady moments, her laugh in the diner, the weight of her head on my shoulder during late night movies, the way she'd always known exactly which stitch to pull to make a design sing. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the vineyard, Lynn reached into her bag and pulled out a small, wrapped package. "For you," she said. A final fitting, of sorts. Inside was a cashmere scarf, the color of Manhattan twilight, embroidered along the edge with tiny scenes, a diner counter, a sewing machine, two figures holding hands, one wearing sunglasses, the other a linen shirt. "I call it the fabric of time," she said, her voice soft. "Because that's what we are, jack threads in each other's stories, forever woven in." I wrapped the scarf around my neck, feeling the softness against my skin, the weight of all we'd been and all we'd become. In the distance, the barn lights flickered, and somewhere, a piano played a Joni Mitchell tune, faint but familiar. We didn't talk about the future, we didn't need to. The sunglasses on her head, the scarf around my neck, the sketches on the wall, they were all the promises we needed. Love, we'd learned, doesn't require grand declarations or perfect stitches. It thrives in the imperfections, the pauses, the way we keep showing up for each other, decade after decade, like the steady rhythm of a sewing machine or the unending tide. As I drove back to the city that night, the scarf warm around my neck, I thought of the first time I'd seen her in those two big sunglasses, laughing as they slid down her nose. She'd been a dreamer then, and she was a dreamer still, only now she knew that the greatest dream wasn't the one we chase, but the one we live, stitch by stitch, with the people who make the journey worth taking, even when the path diverges. The tortoise-shell sunglasses stayed on her desk, I'm sure, a reminder of where it all began. And my wire-rimmed ones, they rest on my nightstand, next to the cashmere scarf, ready for whatever morning comes, sunny, foggy, or raining. Because life, like fabric, is meant to be worn, loved, and cherished, with all its flaws and beauty intact. Part 13. The Bonfire on the Northern Coast. It was a crisp autumn day in 2023 when I arrived at Lynn's cottage, the air sharp with wood smoke and the distant tang of seaweed. She met me at the door, leaning on a cane now, her hair a soft white halo, but her smile was still the same warm, knowing, like she held the secrets of every story we'd ever told. "Brought something to keep the chill away," I said, holding up a bottle of her favorite Cabernet and the cashmere scarf she'd made, now frayed at the edges but still vibrant. "Perfect timing," she said, nodding to the fire pit in the yard, where flames danced against the incoming tide. "I was just thinking about how firelight suits nostalgia." We settled into Adirondack chairs, the kind that creaked with each shift, our feet propped on a weathered log. Lynn wore the tortoise-shell sunglasses atop her head, a habit that hadn't faded, even as her eyesight dimmed. "They're more of a crown now," she joked when I asked. The fire cast orange shadows on her face, softening the lines, making her look like the girl from the diner who drawn dresses on napkins, just a few decades wiser. "Ever wonder what we'd be doing if we stayed together?" she asked suddenly, swirling her wine. "The Hamptons house, the 2.5 kids, the corporate galas." I laughed, staring at the flames. "I think we'd have suffocated each other. You'd have hated the galas, and I'd have killed those roses in the greenhouse within a month." She snorted, a sound that took me back to late-night diner shifts. "True. But you know what I miss most? The potential, that feeling in the diner, when the world was a blank napkin, and we could draw anything we wanted." I nodded, reaching into my pocket for the wire-rimmed sunglasses she'd given me years ago. They'd become my constant companion, their arms etched with the faint grooves of my. "We did draw something, though. Just not the picture we thought." Lynn turned to me, the firelight glinting off the sunglasses on her head. "We drew a life, Jack. One where we learned to love each other not in spite of our flaws, but because of them. That's rarer than any perfect sketch." We fell silent, listening to the waves crash against the shore, the fire popping as a log shifted. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called, a sound that felt like a bridge between past and present. Lynn reached over, patting my hand, the same hand that had once held a diner napkin, now speckled with age spots, but still steady, still familiar. "I'm glad we didn't stay," she said quietly. "Not because it hurt, but because we got to grow into people who could appreciate the journey. You with your garden, me with my seaweed printed dresses. We're happier this way, aren't we? Like two threads in the same tapestry, just on different panels." I smiled, thinking of the community garden back in Brooklyn, where I'd taught kids to plant marigolds alongside stock market terms. She was right, our paths had diverged, but they'd never really separated. Every time I wore that linen shirt, or she saw a diner napkin, we were back there, young and hopeful, ready to take on the world. As the fire died down, Lynn stood, stretching with a sigh. "Come on, let us go inside. I've got something to show you." Final sketch of the year. In her studio, by the light of a single lamp, she unveiled a canvas, a couple sitting by a fire, one wearing sunglasses as a headband, the other wrapped in a cashmere scarf, their hands linked over a basket of fabric scraps. The title was simple: Legacy. "It's not about the dresses or the gardens," she said, tracing the figures' outlines. "It's about the people who make your life a story worth telling. You've been mine, Jack. Always will be." I didn't trust my voice, so I just hugged her, gently, like holding a piece of delicate silk that had survived decades of wear. The scent of lavender and sea salt clung to her sweater, a scent that would forever mean home, no matter where we were. That night, as I lay in the guest room, listening to the rain start up again, I thought of the sunglasses on her desk, the scarf around my neck, the sketch on the wall. They weren't just objects, they were proof that love doesn't have an expiration date. It evolves, like the tide, sometimes distant, sometimes crashing in, but always part of the rhythm of life. In the morning, I left the wire-rimmed sunglasses on her nightstand, swapping them for the tortoise-shell pair from the attic. She protested, but I just smiled. "They belong where the light is brightest," I said, nodding to her studio window. As I drove away, the tortoise-shell sunglasses resting on my dashboard, I realized something. We'd spent a lifetime hiding behind sunglasses, spreadsheets, and some days, but the real magic had been in the moments we'd seen each other clearly, flaws, dreams, and all. And now, in the quiet of our later years, that clarity was its own kind of light, warm and steady, guiding us home. Part 14. The Archive Room at the Fashion Institute. The email arrived in early 2024, subject line, "Time to dust off the past." Literally. Lynn had been invited to donate her life's work to the Fashion Institute of Technology, and she wanted me by her side as she sorted through decades of sketches, prototypes, and memories. I found her in the upstairs loft of her cottage, surrounded by cardboard boxes labeled "Early Days Diner Sketches" and "SF Years Bird Embroidery." Sunlight filtered through the dusty windows, highlighting the silver in her hair as she carefully unwrapped a plastic sleeve containing the original winged pleat dress pattern, yellowed with age but still precise. "Feel like archaeologists digging up our own history," she said, handing me a folder marked Jack S. Folder 1985-1995. Inside were letters I'd written during business trips, a pressed rose from our first anniversary, and a napkin where I'd doodled a stick figure in a suit next to her dress sketch, captioned "My First and Worst Design." I laughed, tracing the lines. "You kept this?" Lynn smiled, adjusting the tortoise-shell sunglasses that now rested on her nose. She'd started wearing them indoors too, joking they were stylish reading glasses. "Every napkin, every letter, every stitch that led to where we are. They're not just mine, Jack. They're ours." We worked through the day, pausing occasionally to admire a particularly vivid sketch or laugh at a failed prototype, a neon green blazer from the 90s that even she called a crime against fabric. But the most poignant find was a leather-bound journal from 1994, the year before she'd moved to San Francisco. Flipping through, I found entries like, "Jack forgot our anniversary again. Wore the sunglasses to hide the tears, but he didn't notice. Maybe he's not supposed to." And later, "Saw a man in the park who looked like him. Turned out it was just the sunlight playing tricks. Maybe I'm the one who's forgotten how to see." I looked up, meeting her gaze across a pile of fabric swatches. "I'm sorry," I said, though the words felt inadequate, decades too late. She waved a hand, dismissive but gentle. "Don't be. Those entries taught me to see my own strength, to realize my worth wasn't tied to whether you noticed my sunglasses or not. And look at us now, we get to appreciate the story without the pain, like viewers at a museum." By afternoon, we curated a display for the Institute, the diner napkin, the wedding ribbon, the first winged pleat prototype, and a photo of us from 1986, laughing in front of her Brooklyn studio, her sunglasses perched on my head as a joke. Beneath it, we wrote a caption, "Love as a work in progress, stitches, stains, and all." As we sealed the last box, Lynn pulled out a small velvet bag, identical to the one that had held the silver cufflinks. "For the Institute," she said, placing the tortoise-shell sunglasses inside. "They belong with the rest of the story now." I nodded, understanding. Those sunglasses had been many things: shield, prop, symbol, but now they were simply part of a legacy, a reminder of two kids in a diner who dared to dream out loud. That evening, we dined on clam chowder and sourdough, watching the sun set over the bay from her porch. Lynn wore no sunglasses, her eyes squinting softly in the golden light, a smile playing on her lips. "Ever think we'd end up here?" she asked, gesturing to the boxes, "the ocean, the life we'd built apart but connected." "No," I said, "but I wouldn't change a stitch." She laughed, a sound that blended with the incoming tide, and for a moment, we were both 25 again, sipping burnt coffee in a Manhattan diner, unaware of the beautiful, flawed tapestry we were about to weave. The next morning, as I prepared to leave, Lynn pressed a final sketch into my hand: two figures standing in front of a museum display, one pointing to a pair of sunglasses, the other holding a garden trowel, their shadows merging into one. No words needed. On the flight home, I looked out at the clouds, thinking of the archive room, the sunglasses in their velvet bag, the journal entries that had once been painful but were now just pages in a book. Love, I realized, isn't about finding the perfect fit, it's about cherishing the garment, patches, and all, and remembering that every crease tells a story. The wire-rimmed sunglasses sat on the tray table, catching the sunlight as we broke through the clouds. I put them on, smiling at the warm, soft focus they provided. Sometimes, the best way to see the past is through a lens that softens the edges, letting the light in without the glare. And as the plane hummed toward home, I knew this wasn't the end of our story, just another chapter, written in the quiet moments of understanding, where two people who once loved and lost now simply knew, deep in their bones, that they'd always be part of each other's design. Part 15. The young designer in the community garden. The donation ceremony at FIT came and went, a quiet affair with soft jazz and polite applause. Lynn stood by the display case housing her sunglasses and diner napkin, accepting hugs from former interns who'd gone on to become designers themselves. But the moment that stayed with me happened 3 months later, in the Brooklyn Community Garden. I was kneeling by a row of tomato plants, coaxing a stubborn vine to climb its trellis, when a young woman in overalls approached, carrying a sketchbook. "You're Jack, right?" she said, her voice tentative but eager. "Lynn mentioned you volunteer here." "I'm Mia, her current intern." I stood, wiping dirt from my hands, noticing the ink stains on her fingers, blue and green, just like Lynn's had been back in the diner. "Ah, the next generation of dreamers," I said, smiling. "What brings you here?" She flipped open her sketchbook to a page filled with dress designs, each one featuring subtle wing-like pleats at the shoulders. "I'm working on my senior collection," she said, and Lynn told me about the wing pleat dress, about how it started on a diner napkin. "She said you were there, that you gave her the courage to believe in her sketches." I studied the drawings, recognizing the same fluid lines, the same attention to how fabric moves on a body. She always said the best designs come from real life, I said, pointing to a dress labeled for the woman who wears many hats. What's her story? Mia lit up, launching into a tale of her aunt, a single mother who worked 2 jobs to put her through school, and how she wanted the dress to be both elegant and practical, with hidden pockets for bus passes and love notes. Listening, I was transported back to the diner, to Lynn describing her first dream dress with the same passion, the same belief that clothes could carry a person's story. Lynn showed me the archive at Fit, Mia said, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. The sunglasses, the napkin, the wedding ribbon. It made me realize design isn't just about stitches. It's about the people who wear them, the memories they hold. I nodded, thinking of the young couple in the diner, so sure of their future yet so blind to the detours ahead. Tell her she's right, I said. And tell her some memories are meant to be shared, to inspire the next person to pick up a pen, or a needle, or a trowel, and start their own story. Mia thanked me, promising to show Lynn the sketches, and wandered off, her overalls flapping in the breeze, sketchbook clutched to her chest. I sat down on the garden bench, watching a monarch butterfly flutter past the tomatoes, and thought of Lynn's words at the archive, love as a work in progress. That evening, I called her to share the encounter. Mia stopped by the garden today, I said. She's got your ink-stained fingers and your knack for seeing the story in a stitch. Lynn laughed, the sound warm and rich. Told her to look for inspiration in the mundane diner napkins, garden dirt, the way sunlight hits a coffee mug. That's where the magic is, isn't it in the ordinary moments that feel like secrets. We talked for hours, as we often did now, about Mia's collection, about the community garden's first harvest, about the new exhibit at Fit that highlighted fashion as memoir. Lynn's voice was slower these days, more deliberate, but no less full of life. She'd taken to wearing the wire-rimmed sunglasses I'd left with her, claiming they matched her new wisdom. As the call ended, I stepped outside, gazing at the Manhattan skyline from my Brooklyn balcony. Somewhere across the country, Lynn was probably sketching in her coastal cottage, the tortoise-shell sunglasses a silent presence on her desk, now part of a legacy that had outgrown both of us. I thought of Mia, of all the young designers who traced the story of those sunglasses and that diner napkin, and I smiled. Our story wasn't just ours anymore. It had become a thread in the vast tapestry of love and loss, reminding others that even the most broken hearts can stitch together a life of beauty, one memory at a time. The wire-rimmed sunglasses lay on the windowsill, catching the last rays of the sun. I put them on, not to hide, but to see the world through a lens that softened the edges, turning ordinary moments into something sacred. Because in the end, that's what Lynn had taught me, to find the extraordinary in the everyday, the light in the shadow, and the courage to keep seeing, even when the past is nothing but a pair of sunglasses in a museum case. Life, I realized, is a never-ending collection of moments, some stitched with joy, some with sorrow, but all part of the design. And as long as there are people like Mia, and like Lynn, who dare to dream and create and share, those moments will never fade, they'll just keep unfolding, like the gentle tide on a northern California coast, bringing beauty and meaning to whoever is brave enough to look. Part 16. The Springtide of 2025. The call came in April, the kind that makes your heart sink before the phone even rings. Lynn's voice was lighter than usual, almost airy, but there was a purpose in her words. Come visit, Jack. The whales are migrating, and I want to show you something. I arrived to find her sitting on the porch, wrapped in the cashmere scarf I'd worn to the fit ceremony, her hands resting on a lap blanket embroidered with tiny whales. Mia's graduation gift, she told me. The tortoise-shell sunglasses lay beside her, but she didn't wear them, her eyes closed as she breathed in the salt air. Miss this view, I said, sitting down, placing a hand over hers. Her skin was papery, but warm, still carrying the faint scent of lavender. She opened her eyes, smiling softly. I've been sorting through boxes again, she said, nodding to a stack by the door. Found something I want you to have. Inside the top box was a leather-bound album I'd never seen, labeled our soundtrack. Flipping through, I found ticket stubs from Joni Mitchell concerts, playlists written in her cursive, and pressed flowers from every significant moment, a rose from our first date, a daisy from the day she'd sold her first dress, a sea holly from the beach where we'd talked about legacy. But the centerpiece was a CD labeled For Jack the Diner Days, tucked into a sleeve decorated with doodles of sunglasses and coffee mugs. I recorded it years ago, she said. Joni, of course, but also some new songs, ones I wrote while sewing, about us, about the sunglasses, about how love changes shape but never really fades. I held the CD like a relic, blinking back tears. You never told me you wrote songs. She laughed, a frail sound but full of mischief. You never asked. Besides, some things are better kept for when the time feels right. And Jack, the time feels very right. We spent the day in her studio, her head resting on my shoulder as we listened to the CD. Her voice was raw, untrained, but filled with the truth that no professional singer could match. The sunglasses hid my tears, but your smile found its way through the cracks, she sang on one track. We were never meant to be perfect, just meant to be each other's map. In the evening, she insisted on a walk to the tide pools, leaning heavily on my arm. The sun dipped low, painting the ocean in hues of apricot and lavender, and for a moment, it was 1985 again. Two kids in a diner, two souls on a beach, both unaware of the beauty that comes from letting life unfold, flawed and glorious. Back at the cottage, she handed me a manila envelope, sealed with the ivory from our wedding. Open it after I'm gone, she said, her voice steady. Not yet, though. We've still got whales to watch and stories to tell. I didn't ask what was inside. I just held her hand, listening to the waves and the distant cry of a loon, feeling the weight of a lifetime in that single touch. She was right, we had time, not much, but enough to appreciate the quiet miracle of being together, of having loved and lost and found each other again in the gentlest of ways. That night, as I lay in the guest room, I thought of the sunglasses on her desk, the CD in my bag, the envelope under my pillow. They weren't just objects, they were anchors, reminders that love isn't measured in years or milestones, but in the courage to see and be seen, even when the world feels too bright or too dark. In the morning, Lynn was already in the studio, sketching by the window. She'd put on the wire-rimmed sunglasses, her hand moving steadily across the page. "For Mia," she said, showing me a design for a maternity dress, the shoulders dotted with tiny whales. "She's expecting, did I tell you?" says she wants her baby to feel like they're wrapped in a story. I smiled, tracing the whales with my finger. "They will be. Thanks to you, they'll be wrapped in a story of love, courage, and sunglasses that taught us to see the light in every chapter." She nodded, satisfied, and turned back to her sketch, the sunlight catching the lenses of her sunglasses, creating a halo of light around her. In that moment, she wasn't just Lynn the designer or Lynn the ex-wife, she was Lynn the storyteller, weaving together the threads of a life well lived, one stitch at a time. As the whales flew in the distance, their calls echoing across the bay, I knew this was what peace felt like: quiet, profound, rooted in the knowledge that some connections are eternal, transcending time and circumstance. The sunglasses had served their purpose, as had the suits and the sewing machines and the garden trowels. What remained was the essence of two people who'd seen each other clearly, finally, after all the years of hiding and finding their way back. And as I joined her at the window, watching the tide come in, I understood that our story would never truly end. It would live on in Mia's dresses, in the CD's scratchy melodies, in the archive at Fifth, and most importantly, in the hearts of anyone who'd ever dared to love, lose, and let the light back in. Part 17. The Envelope and the Final Sketch. Lynn passed away peacefully that summer, with the sound of whales in the distance and the CD of her songs playing softly in the background. I stayed in her cottage for a week, sorting through her things with Mia, who cried when she found the whale-embroidered maternity dress half-finished on the sewing machine. She wanted it to have pockets for ultrasound pictures, Mia said, tracing the fabric. Always thinking about the stories clothes would carry. Back in New York, months later, I finally opened the manila envelope she'd given me. Inside was a sketchbook page, dated the day I'd visited in April, and a letter written in her neatest cursive. The sketch showed two figures floating in the ocean, one wearing sunglasses as a headband, the other holding a CD, their legs tangled like seaweed, a whale breaching in the background. The title, Ebb and Flow. The letter began, "Dear Jack, if you're reading this, I've probably gone to join the whales. Always did envy their ability to migrate without looking back. Don't be sad. We had the kind of love that most people only dream of, messy, real, full of stitches and scars. The sunglasses, they were never about hiding. They were about finding the courage to step into the light, even when it hurt. You gave me that courage, all those years ago in the diner, when you saw the girl behind the lenses. I paused, wiping away a tear that had fallen on the sketch, smudging the whale's fin. Her words felt like a warm hand on my shoulder, reassuring, familiar. Take the CD, the sunglasses, the napkin, they're not mementos. They're invitations to keep living, keep seeing the beauty in ordinary moments. And when you miss me, put on those wire-rimmed sunglasses and go for a walk by the sound. The light's different through those lenses, isn't it's softer, more forgiving. Just like love. The letter ended with a postscript, oh, and Mia's having a girl. Name her Lynn, will you, not after me, but after the girl in the diner who learned that love is the best design of all. I laughed through the tears, picturing Mia's daughter growing up surrounded by stories of whales and winged dresses, of diners, and dreams. That night, I played the CD she'd made, her voice singing A Case of You with the rawness that felt like a hug. The tortoise-shell sunglasses went to fit, displayed beside the napkin and the wedding ribbon, but the wire-rimmed one stayed with me, resting on my nightstand, ready for morning walks. Fall came, and with it, the opening of Lynn's permanent exhibit at the museum. Mia wore the whale-embroidered dress, her baby girl strapped to her chest, as we unveiled a plaque that read, "To Lynn, who taught us that every stitch, every tear, every ray of light is part of the design." Afterward, I walked to the diner-turned-coffee shop, now called Lynn's Corner thanks to Mia's fundraising. The old counter was still there, and I ordered a black coffee, no sugar, just like she used to make. As I sat, a young couple entered, the girl wearing oversized sunglasses that slid down her nose when she laughed, the boy in a linen shirt with a tiny bird embroidered on the cuff. I smiled, recognizing the pattern Mia's work, no doubt. They talked animatedly, sketching on a napkin, and I wondered if they'd one day look back on this moment as the start of their own story, filled with sunglasses and seaweed and the courage to see each other clearly. Life, I've learned, is a series of hellos and goodbyes, but the best kind of love transcends both. It lives in the napkins we sketch on, the songs we record, the dresses we sew for the next generation. Lynn's legacy wasn't in the fabric or the fame, it was in the way she taught everyone around her to embrace the imperfect, to find the light in every shadow, and to never, ever stop dreaming out loud. As I sipped the coffee still burnt, still perfect, I thought of her final sketch, the two figures in the ocean, forever connected by the tides of time. We loved, we lost, we learned to see. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. The wire-rimmed sunglasses sat on the table, catching the afternoon sun. I put them on, and through their lenses, the world looked warmer, softer, like a story waiting to be told. And maybe, in a way, it was our story, now part of the great, endless narrative of love, loss, and the quiet miracles of everyday life. Part 18. The Rose Garden and the Little Lynn. The first spring after Lynn's passing, I planted a rose garden in the community plot, stubborn hybrids, just like the ones she'd grown in the Long Island greenhouse. Mia came by with her daughter, now a toddling bundle in a dress stitched with tiny whales, her chubby hands reaching for the blooms. "Lynn, Mia said, pointing to the girl, then to the roses. Two legends in training. I laughed, lifting the baby onto my hip, her tiny fist grabbing at the wire-rimmed sunglasses on my head. Careful, I said, those are vintage. Your grandma Lynn would be called them stylish reading glasses. Mia smiled, kneeling to inspect a bud about to bloom. I found her last sketchbook, she said, pulling it from her bag. The one with the whale dress. Their essay page where she drew you teaching a kid to plant tomatoes, and her sewing machine by the window. The title was Legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's who you grow beside. I looked down at the little girl, her eyes wide as she touched a rose petal, and thought of Lynn's words in the diner, all those years ago, in my movie, I'm wearing this dress I designed, walking down Fifth Avenue, and everyone stops to look. She de-stopped countless people, not with a dress, but with the courage to live authentically, to turn pain into beauty, to see the story in every stitch. That summer, Mia debuted her first solo collection at Fit, titled Threads of the Tides. I sat in the front row, the tortoise-shell sunglasses from the archive loaned for the occasion resting on my lap. The show opened with the model wearing a recreation of the winged pleat dress, modified with sustainable linen and a patch of sea glass embroidery, Mia's tribute to both Lynn and the ocean. But the moment that stole the show was when Mia herself walked out, carrying little Lynn, now too, in a miniature version of the dress, her tiny sunglasses a gift from me perched precariously on her nose. The audience gasped, then laughed as the baby reached for her mother's hair, the dress's pleats fluttering like tiny wings. This collection is for Lynn, Mia said into the microphone, her voice steady but emotional, who taught me that fashion is about more than fabric, it's about the people who wear it, the memories they carry, and the courage to keep stitching even when the thread frays. She paused, looking at me, then at the baby. And it's for little Lynn, who'll grow up surrounded by stories of diners and dreams, sunglasses, and sea whales, and a love that outlives us all. Tears blurred my vision as the lights dimmed, but I didn't need to see clearly. I could feel Lynn there, in the rustle of the dresses, in the baby's giggle, in the shared silence of a room full of people who'd been touched by a story that had started with a pair of thrift store sunglasses and a napkin sketch. After the show, Mia handed me a small box. Inside was a pair of child-sized sunglasses, tortoise-shell patterned, with Lynn Jr. engraved on the temple. For when she's ready to start her own movie, Mia said, smiling. I took the box, thinking of the diner where it all began, of the countless mornings I'd spent staring at spreadsheets instead of the woman beside me, of the years we'd spent learning to see each other again. Life, I realized, wasn't about the perfect fit or the unbroken stitch. It was about the people who taught us to embrace the flaws, to find light in the shadows, and to keep creating, no matter how many times the thread snapped. That fall, I visited the Long Island greenhouse, now converted into a community art space. The roses had spread their thorns and blooms, a perfect metaphor for the life Lynn and I had shared, painful at times, but always beautiful, always worth the care. I left the child-sized sunglasses on the windowsill, next to a new sketch, a little girl in a winged dress, chasing a butterfly, her sunglasses sliding down her nose as she laughed. Somewhere, Lynn was probably rolling her eyes at the sentimentality, but I knew she'd approve. Because legacy, as she'd drawn in that last sketchbook, wasn't about the dresses or the awards or the museums. It was about the love we passed on, the courage we inspired, and the stories we left in the hearts of those who came after. As I walked back to the car, the wire-rimmed sunglasses on my nose, the sun setting over the sound, I felt a peace I hadn't known since the diner days. Lynn was gone, but she was also everywhere, in the roses, in the dresses, in the laughter of a little girl named after her, in the quiet certainty that love, in all its forms, is eternal. And so, I drove home, ready for the next chapter, one where I'd tend to my garden, play Lynn's CD when the house felt too quiet, and maybe, just maybe, start sketching again, because she'd taught me that everyone has a story to tell, and every story deserves to be seen, sunglasses or not. Part 19. The Diner Revisited on a 70th Birthday. My 70th birthday dawned crisp and clear, the kind of fall day that smells like cinnamon and nostalgia. I took the train into Manhattan, heading not to the sleek offices of my past, but to the corner where it all began, now Lynn's Corner, the diner Mia had transformed into a haven for dreamers, with sketches of dresses framing the walls and a menu featuring Lynn's special, coffee plus courage. The bell jingled as I entered, and I was greeted by a mural on the back wall, a giant rendering of that first diner napkin sketch, blown up to life, the woman in the winged dress, sunglasses atop her head, walking toward a sunrise. Below it, Mia had written, "Every story starts with a single line. What's yours?" I slid into a booth, the vinyl seat still creaking like it had in 1985, and ordered a black coffee, no sugar. The waitress, a young girl with Mia's ink-stained fingers, smiled as she set the mug down, ceramic now, not chipped porcelain, but the steam rising in the same way, carrying the same promise of warmth. "First time here?" she asked, noticing my lingering gaze on the mural. "Sort of," I said, tracing the condensation on the mug. I knew the woman who inspired the mural. We used to sit right here, talking about dresses and dreams and how the world could be better. Her eyes lit up. "Oh, you're Jack. Mia talks about you all the time. Said you're the reason this place exists, that Lynn wouldn't have believed in her sketches without you." I laughed, surprised but pleased. I think Lynn believed in her sketches long before I came along. She just needed someone to listen. The girl nodded, pulling out a napkin and a pen. "Can I ask you something? What was she like? Really, the mural's beautiful, but I want to know the real Lynn." I sipped the coffee, warm and bold, just like I remembered. "She was fierce," I said, smiling at the memory of her arguing with Richard at the Christmas party, of her laughing as sunglasses slid down her nose. Fierce in her love for fabric, for the women who wear her designs, for the idea that life could be a masterpiece if you dared to sketch it first. But she was gentle too, like the way she'd hum while sewing, or how she'd saved the last bite of pie for the old man who came in every night. The girl scribbled on the napkin, then handed it to me, a quick sketch of Lynn, sunglasses on her head, holding a sewing machine like a guitar. "For you," she said. "To add to your story." I thanked her, tucking the napkin into my pocket, next to the wire-rimmed sunglasses. Across the diner, a couple in their 20s sat at the counter, the girl holding up a napkin with a dress sketch, the boy nodding earnestly. It could be been us, all those years ago, young, hopeful, unaware of the journey ahead. Later, I walked to Pit, where the tortoise-shell sunglasses rested in their display case, beside the diner napkin and the wedding ribbon. A group of students gathered around, pointing at the exhibit, their voices excited as they debated the symbolism of the sunglasses. "Think about it," one said, "they're not just an accessory. They're a metaphor for seeing and being seen, for hiding and healing." I smiled, walking on. They were right, of course. Those sunglasses had been all those things and more: shield, symbol, bridge between two lives that had intertwined, diverged, and intertwined again in the most beautiful ways. That night, I played Lynn's CD as I packed for a trip to California, to visit Mia and little Lynn, now 5 and obsessed with whales and Grandma Lynn's stories. The song Diner Days played, her voice soft and raw. We thought we needed a map, but love's a compass pointing not to where we were, but to who we became. I fell asleep thinking of the diner mural, the sketch on the napkin, the little girl in the whale dress. Lynn had been right all along. Legacy isn't in the things we leave behind, but in the lives we be touched, the courage we be inspired, the love we be shared. As I drifted off, I saw her clearly, no sunglasses needed, laughing in the diner, sketching on a napkin, her eyes bright with the future we'd never fully imagined but had somehow built anyway. And in that moment, I knew she was with me, not as a memory, but as a presence, a part of me as permanent as the ink on those napkins, as the love that had stitched our stories together, flaw by beautiful flaw. Part 20. The final sunset at the Sound. The last time I visited the Long Island greenhouse, it was a quiet evening in late October, the kind where the air feels like a sigh, heavy with the promise of winter. I'd come to donate Lynn's old sewing machine to the community art space, but found myself lingering by the rose garden, watching the sun dip below the Sound, its light turning the water into liquid gold. I wore the wire-rimmed sunglasses she'd given me, their lenses softening the horizon into a warm blur. Somewhere behind me, a child laughed, chasing a butterfly, a little girl in pigtails, wearing a dress with whale embroidery, her mother's voice calling her name. Mia's daughter, I realized, now 6, too far away to see her face, but her laughter was a melody I knew well. Sitting on the bench where Lynn had once sketched roses, I pulled out the diner napkin from my pocket, the one the young waitress had drawn for me, Lynn holding a sewing machine like a guitar, sunglasses askew. It was a fitting final sketch, I thought, capturing the humor and heart of the woman who turned a diner into a dream, a pair of sunglasses into a symbol of courage. The sewing machine hummed in the background, now part of the art space's workshop, where kids learned to stitch patches onto jeans and grandmothers taught quilting classes. Lynn would be loved it. I decided her machine, once the heartbeat of her Brooklyn studio, now a tool for new stories, new dreams. As the light faded, I took off the sunglasses, letting the cool evening air hit my eyes. No tears, just a deep, abiding peace. I thought of all we'd been, lovers, strangers, friends, and how love had transformed, not faded, over the decades. The sunglasses had been a bridge between the versions of us who needed to hide and the versions who learned to see. In the distance, Mia's voice rose in a lullaby, soft and sure, carrying across the garden. It took me a moment to recognize it, A Case of You, the song that had played in the diner on our first date, the song Lynn had recorded on that CD, the song that had become the soundtrack of our lives. I closed my eyes, letting the notes wash over me. When I opened them, the little girl was standing in front of me, her whale dress dusted with rose petals, a pair of tiny sunglasses perched on her head. "You're Jack," she said, matter of fact, like we'd met 100 times before. "Mom says you knew my Grandma Lynn." I smiled, nodding. I did. She was the best designer of dreams I ever met. She climbed onto the bench beside me, pointing to the sunset. "Mom says Grandma Lynn's in the light now, the kind that doesn't need sunglasses. Is that true?" I looked at the horizon, where the last rays of sun clung to the water, golden and gentle. "I think she's in all the light," I said, "the kind that warms your skin, the kind that makes roses grow, the kind that lets you see the beauty in every stitch of life." The girl nodded, satisfied, and reached into her pocket, pulling out a crumpled napkin. "I drew you," she said, handing it to me. It was a stick figure holding a coffee mug, another figure beside him with a sewing machine, both wearing sunglasses, a whale swimming in the background. "For your story," she said. I hugged her, careful not to crease the napkin. "Thank you, little Lynn. This is the best drawing I've ever seen." As her mother called her again, she hopped off the bench, waving goodbye, her sunglasses sliding down her nose. In that moment, she was both Mia's daughter and Lynn's legacy, a perfect blend of past and future, of stories told and yet to be written. I stayed until the sun had fully set, the stars emerging one by one, pinpricks of light in the darkening sky. The sunglasses lay beside me on the bench, but I didn't put them on. The night was clear, the world visible in soft focus, and for the first time in years, I felt no need to hide or shield. Walking back to the car, I passed a greenhouse, now lit from within, the sewing machine's hum a steady rhythm. Inside, a group of teenagers laughed as they stitched patches onto canvas bags, their voices full of hope, full of tomorrows. Lynn had been right, all those years ago in the diner. Life is a movie, but we get to design the costumes, choose the scenes, decide when to wear the sunglasses and when to let the light in. And though our story had had its share of tears and goodbyes, it had also had love, deep, abiding, transforming love that had outlived every storm, every silence, every mile between us. As I drove home, the little girl's napkin safe in my pocket, I thought of the first line of Lynn's final letter, legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's who you grow beside. She'd grown beside me, and I beside her, and together, we'd taught the world that love, in all its imperfect glory, is the greatest design of all. The wire-rimmed sunglasses sat on the dashboard, catching the glow of passing streetlights. I didn't need them anymore. The road ahead was clear, lit by the memories we'd made, the love we'd shared, and the certainty that somewhere, in the eternal light, Lynn was smiling, her sunglasses atop her head, ready for the next chapter wherever it may lead. And as the miles rolled by, I felt it, the gentle pull of sleep, warm and inviting, like a well-worn dress, like a diner napkin sketch, like the soft voice of a storyteller guiding you home.